Welcome to IABC Today, the podcast of the Kansas City chapter of the International Association of Business Communicators. I'm your host, Roy Harryman.
Our guest today is Chakisse Newton, one of the keynote speakers at our Business Communicators Summit on Friday, February 15th at the Overland Park Convention Center. Chakisse, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I want to give our listeners a brief introduction to you before we explore the topic that you'll be developing on the 15th. And Chakisse is the founder and president of Cardinal Consulting. And previously, she served in a variety of leadership roles in sales and marketing on a global scale. And particularly relevant to her speaking engagement coming up here in Kansas City, she's been recognized twice by Toastmasters International as one of the 10 best speakers in the world. So I'm a little intimidated, I have to say, talking to you on the phone here.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, her topic on the 15th is communicating for results, how to build brands and relationships that build business. And we are not going to steal your thunder here, Chakisse, but we do want to dip our toes a little bit into this topic to give everyone a taste of what you will be discussing. And first of all, you're going to help us improve every type of communication we undertake, whether it's written, verbal, professional, or personal. And obviously, all of us need to improve. With that said, what are a few, of the most common communication mistakes that you see communication professionals making?
Well, that's an excellent question. And what you will find, especially with the Kansas City area communicators, is that you are all excellent communicators. You are fabulous at what you do. And the most frequent communication mistakes are actually common sense, but not necessarily common practice. And the number one mistake that communicators of all stripes make is not thinking from the perspective of the audience. We have so much to do. We have so many things that we need to accomplish, and we want to get our message across. But it's so easy to be lulled into thinking from our own perspective that we don't stop and say, first and foremost, my job is to connect with another human being. What is it, first of all, that I want my listener to think, feel, say, or do differently because of this communication, number one. Number two, what are the concerns and the questions of the person that I'm trying to communicate with? And then number three would be, how can you merge those together, understanding what your listener cares about, understanding what you would like to achieve through your communication, and then making it happen. So that is really the number one communication mistake that I see. And it happens across the board at every level of organization, every level of communication, whether it's talking to your spouse about where you'd like to go out for dinner, or whether it is communicating on a global level, trying to convert customers and build a loyal following.
Well, those are good thoughts. Yeah, communication would be a lot easier if we didn't have to adapt to our audience, but that's a component.
It would, or if you could beam what you want directly from your brain to the other person's heart, I guess, because beaming from brain to brain might miss some things. But if you could beam from your brain to the other person's heart without any kinds of words or body language interfering, I think it would be a beautiful thing.
Well, we want to get as close as we can. I'm curious, based on your emphasis on communicating with excellence in all aspects of the things that we try to share. If you observe people, and I'm not asking you to name anyone, but who are incredibly gifted at maybe at writing or strategizing, but do a terrible job of communicating in person with team members, a board, or maybe even a boss.
Absolutely. And in fact, the immediate example that came to my mind is probably too identifiable. But what I observe, not just as a consultant, but also as an executive speech coach working with people and executives so that they can present more powerfully and more confidently, is that we all have strengths that we rely on. So even those of us who are excellent verbal and oral communicators might have a style of presentation that we prefer, whether we prefer one-on-one or we prefer to speak to a crowd of people, whether we prefer Q&A or whether we prefer more of a lecture format. We all have strengths. And so what's important from my perspective is to keep that audience first and foremost and then adapt it to the methodology. But also, if I may, there's one other challenge that communicators face that relates to adapting to the audience and also to your question, and that's this. We have to make sure that we are using the right medium for our communication. And we have to make sure that we're not just converting old formats to new technologies, but that we actually adjust our message. Here's an example. If you are driving down the highway in your car, you might see a billboard. The online analog of that, or the online comparison of that, would be an ad or a banner ad. And what happens a lot of times is that people or communicators are trying to say, how can I take this other means of communication and squeeze it into this new means of communication and make it fit? Sometimes an email is the right way to communicate, but sometimes you absolutely must pick up the phone. Just because you have a means of communication at your disposal doesn't mean it's the right means. So you have to choose the right vehicle to reach the right audience the right way. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, I just think how much time has been wasted, how many misunderstandings could have been prevented if someone had chosen, not to communicate through email. So your point is well taken. We just have time for one more question here, and I see that you're going to address communicating for different personality types. So apparently one size does not fit all.
That is true, and that will be the focus of the presentation has changed a bit, so I don't know how much we'll get to address that. And instead of talking about different personality types, what I've been asked to address are different audiences, which is to say a business-to-business audience, a business-to-consumer audience, and an interpersonal audience. And so I don't know that we'll have time to delve in to personality types, but we will delve into communicating in those different kinds of scenarios.
Well, those are going to be extremely helpful for our audience. Let me ask you a follow-up question, and that is, how do you think the fact that we live in such an interconnected age makes successful communication even more important? So, for example, if you're giving a speech nowadays, it would seem that you better not say anything that you don't intend for the whole world to hear, because you never know who's recording it.
Well, it's interesting, and I think that we've always had word of mouth, and now it is amplified and sped up. But if I would say that what we have to do is we really have to think more creatively, and we have to consider things that we might not have thought of before. Here's an example. I am a faculty member for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute of Organizational Management. I was out in Tucson last week, and I gave 2 courses on creating a customer service environment that sells. The exact same course for one group in the morning and one group in the afternoon. So I do my session in the afternoon, and I ask a not quite rhetorical question, but an important question for the audience to ponder to set up one of my key points. So I ask the question, no one has the answer. Crickets. Then finally someone says, oh, I know, is the answer XYZ? And I say, well, yes, it is. How did you know? She says, I saw it on a tweet. So she went and looked at the tweets from earlier in the day and found the answer to my question. And that was just something that I had never really anticipated before. So certainly we have to think of our reputation and making sure that we're not saying anything that we wouldn't want broadcast on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times the next day. But we also have to think that all of our utterances are out there. And what does that mean when you live in an environment where rhetorical questions are perhaps not as rhetorical as they used to be? And then truthfully, one of the challenges for marketers who are within organizations is one of the challenges we face to opt-in marketing and opt-in communications is that our audiences know that they don't have to opt in from us. Whatever the information is, I can go find it when I want it. And so one of the challenges that we have is how do we adapt to that? How do we provide so much value that people want to stay connected with us to receive the things that we want to send to them, as opposed to saying, no, it's not necessary, because if I really, really want it, I can just search for it.
That's right. Well, I can tell this is going to be a thought-provoking presentation, and I know everyone is going to want to hear more of what Chakisse has to say on this topic. Plus, she's doing one of our breakout sessions as well. So if you haven't committed and registered, you can do it now at kc.iabc.com, or just check out the link in today's podcast. Well, Chakisse, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in person in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much. It was great fun.
Thanks for joining us for KC IABC Today. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes as well as our YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to receive automatic updates on both. Learn more about us at kc.iabc.com. Thanks again.